Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Founder Wisdom Podcast. Today we have a special edition, the Startup Studio edition with Šimun Strukan. He is co-founder at synthesis.co and he is office chair. He came back to his chair.
Sorry, just forgot to close the doors.
Šimun, how's it going? Tell us where you're based. Tell us a bit more about yourself, your background, and your company.
Okay, rapid fire. So I'm based in Zagreb. I'm 30-year-old mechanical engineer. I graduated about 15 years ago. As it turns out, I ended up in software development. It was part of my curriculum. So sooner or later, I got into it. You need to know how to code these days to be a proper engineer. So at the end of the day, I got hooked on it. I started in high school more as a hobby, and I've been doing it ever since. On and off. But about 2005, I started professionally. That's when I sold my first web design, as it was called back then. And from there on, I've been doing it ever since. And a couple of years back, hopping from startup to startup, I met with a couple of developers that I really clicked. That was about 6 years ago. We worked together on a project. And then when that startup ran out of funding, we wanted to kind of keep working together. And out of that idea came the Synthesis Startup Studio. I would say initially what we liked and why we kind of like came together is that we're all engineers, but kind of on the creative side, a little bit open and maybe, not orthodoxly, engineer types with very organized, how should I say, conscientious attitudes. So we figured out we like startups, we like greenfield projects, as they call them. We like people with new ideas. We all have this kind of extroverted entrepreneurship personas. And so we took it from there and we realized we mainly want to work with startups. So we picked this niche where we take pre-seed startups from, 50K to all the way to Series A. And that became the business model that's known as Startup Studio.
Pre-seed to Series A. So you don't actually found the startups internally yourself. You do outreach to existing ones. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. At the moment, that's something that we do want to grow into, that we are actually capable to put some money directly, from the investment fund that we can put together. But the thing that if you consider money as a capital, and we didn't have money, but the capital that we had was like 15 years of engineering experience working specifically for startups. So at the moment when we needed to start working again, as usually ends up with startups, you end up short on cash. So for us, it was like, let's figure out what expertise we have and how can we capitalize on them. And when we cross sections the idea that we want to work in startups, we realize that what we invest in startups is this experience and actual technical know-how. And now in the last couple of years, we tried to figure out how to turn that also into an actual investment fund. So it's it's a juggling thing. You juggle development, business development, and finance, and try to find the balance between them. But the goal is to basically take pre-seed startups and kind of like, it's not only a technical support, it's also kind of like a product development support, design, the business development. We collaborate with various digital agencies for marketing efforts, things like that. So slowly we are expanding our influence that we can take on the startup, but it all started with basically us being engineering experience with, kicking off new projects all the time.
Love it. And
yeah,
you go see that startup, how much % do you take from the pre-seed? Is it like as big as 10% or is it in the single digits?
Well, it depends, but it's like between the margins of a usual, let's say, private or investment, or institutional investment like a VC. So it can be anywhere from like 2% to 10 or 15. It depends on the people. Startups are very much like personal stuff. You don't get it. You don't start with a bunch of people. There's usually 2 or 3 guys having a cup of coffee, talking about ideas. And then somebody says, listen, dude, if you can pull this out for me, I'll give you 20% of my company, And then on the other side, you have people who are like very, how should I say, careful who to let in, and they will let you like 1 or 2, maybe 5,
Skeptics.
So it depends. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah, and I guess also,
but it's like sorry.
Yeah, how many founders on the board or the cap table? And I'm also wondering, are you like mostly local because you're in Zagreb, you're in
Yeah.
Croatia? Are you focusing on Croatian startups or let's say Baltic startup?
No, actually, we are located, the development offices are in Zagreb. Most of the engineers are here. Our CEO is living in Switzerland, in Bern. And we have like collaborators, throughout Europe, what is London? But primarily for the last 3 or 4 years, we mainly worked with East Coast, West Coast of the USA. That's, I mean, a lot of startups from a lot of areas, but in terms of like where the most of the revenue comes in, that's mostly from the States, right? Because it's the most vibrant startup scene. There's most money there. So namely California. So, we'll do a lot of American startups.
How many startups do you handle at the same time?
Well, we are currently have about 15 developers at various levels, so that allows us to maybe handle like 1 to 2 really large ones. Let's say if we are like 2 or 3 years deep into development, it usually ends up being a lot of our core team working on that. And we usually might need some outsourced specific specialists, whether it's like something like machine learning or whatever, game development, something like that. But the thing is, a lot of our startups that we get are really in the first stages. So we have like this separated maybe in 3 sub stages internally, where we first take them to a prototype or proof of concept phase, then prototype, then MVP. So we can have at any time, like I can handle, let's say 2 or 3 smaller projects that are mainly on paper, that where we're just sketching the prototype, the proof of concept, and there's some design involved. And in the meantime, concurrently, team is working on something else. So we can juggle, let's say 5 or 6 smaller projects at the same time with, let's say 1 or 2 bigger ones, And since we internally organized our process in a way that everything overlaps, so we try to like usually do 2 or 3 things at the same time. So I don't know if it's good or bad, but
Mostly good.
we're still weighing in. Yeah.
I mean, that's my style too. I'm not really, I mean, organization structure is important, but I am a lover of chaos. Wonderful things happen in chaos, and having deadlines and uncertainty, and once you master these emotions of fear, the anger and all of that, that's where crazy things happen for the better and for the worse. So I think like moonshots, a lot of moonshots see life in chaos. Were your startups affected or yourself by the SVB, Silicon Valley Bank debacle that happened recently?
Finally, my dad just called me up this morning and asked me, guys, did you invest anything in SVB? I said no.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, thank God. But I think, I mean, a lot of things has been happening in the last couple of years, especially last 18 months. So it's hard to discern where it's, we are pretty close to the Ukrainian war and things like that. And Europe has its own micro thing. And then there's the States and their internal things, and everything. So the pandemic just happened. So it's kind of hard to figure out like what cause is to what effect, right?
Exactly.
But I would say in the last 10 months, you can definitely feel a little bit of like slowing down from what we've kind of used to, even after the pandemic. So definitely, yeah. I mean, people are being a little bit more skeptical and a little bit more, how should I say, cautious about where they're putting their money and things like that. But on the other hand, I mean, we opened the business 10 months before the lockdown started. So, we just kicked off a new business. We had something lined up, and then everything froze come March, I think 2020, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and we managed to live through that, so I'm kind of hoping the worst is behind us,
Yeah, for tech companies, it's actually been a positive thing. And if anything, what we've seen the last year, entropy is accelerating, so more and more chaos, which could mean, like disaster, but it also means like unicorns being built and unique opportunities to be caught by people that have their eyes open. Most of people, they don't have their eyes open. My quick question for you is, do you love opening your computer and coming to work in this climate of uncertainty, or does it mostly scare you?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think part of it is, what do you use your computer for? If you spend all day on Twitter, then you're going to get anxious. Right? But the thing is, I kind of joke about it. When I was a kid, my mom would walk into my room like every 30 minutes and like tell me, "Are you again behind the computer wasting time?" And I think the only thing that turned somewhere in some point of my life is that at some point I started wasting money and started earning money in front of computer, you know. So I would say in terms of like sitting behind a computer, that's something that's been in my life since I was a kid playing games, you know. So I would do it whatever happened in the world. It's a job as much as it is a form of escape. You know, you can play games, you can, you know, chat with people on forum, or you can, you know, watch porn and read Twitter. It depends what do you want to do, you know.
Yeah, it's
So
like
I code and I you know, talk to people on Discord, Slack groups and things like that.
yeah, that's why, you know, it's double-edged sword.
Yeah.
All this technology, you know, like people can use it for good, people can use it for bad. And that's a tricky thing, you know, because you can fall in a hole online.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can fall in a anxiety hole. You can fall in a addiction hole with TikTok and porn and all of these things, you know, and you need to be careful. And I think this system is just discarding humans that are not meant to be in this market. It's really like survival of the fittest at its strongest. And yeah, I think it's exciting to just, well, for me, and depending on your type of personality, I guess most people find it scary, everything that's happening in this market. But for me, I love chaos. I love war. Well, not war like the typical Ukraine one, but
yeah, I understand.
I love, you know, the action, the chaos, and the challenge, the adversity.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be turmoil on the markets. There's always going to be, you know, some dictator somewhere that thinks he's going to invade somebody else. There's always going to be bad people and good people, you know. And I mean, I would say that you can't really eliminate the chaos that you kind of talk about the way that we handle it. I mean, me personally, I love the Pareto distribution, the thumb rule, right? 80-20 rule. So basically, and I've applied this in the company, we have about 20% of things tightly organized that gives us the opportunity to work remote and work in this chaotic environment. But still, at the end of the day, you have this foundation anchored for us, let's say, on a development basis, that we are pretty like disciplined about our daily stand-ups. You can't miss a daily stand-up or things like that, or minute weekly things that are completely mandatory unless you're dying or have a crisis of, you know, complete burning house around you. You have to show up, and that gives us the basis that gives the rest of the days for everybody to kind of like play around, be free to organize in their own time how they see fit, and the entire company is structured like that. So yeah, I completely agree. You have to calculate in the chaos in the entire process. And I think what the three of us kind of like made it this far because we have this almost like this, it's not naive kind of stubbornness about it. You know, what's the worst that can happen? You just have to work on through, you know, problems going to happen, things going to fall apart, but you kind of like push through and wake up the next day to go to work.
Yeah, courage and getting used to stuff. You also synonym with experience. You've experienced it, you know. And for me, for example, I've gone through so many things in my business. I know that I'm not killable, you know. I'm like a cockroach. I always survive whatever you throw at me. So why feel anxious about not having money in the bank or this client being angry? You know, it's like I don't mind. I'll get through it. And I love the 80-20 thing, the bell curve. And referring to war and tyrant or authoritarian leaders, I think we're really at the end of the bell curve, and these leaders are trying to stick to something that does not exist, you know, which is I have the sole control. I have the sole control on my country. I decide, I know this is not gonna last, you know. It's like, it's not scalable, this thing.
It's a dying breed.
It's it's literally dying. And Putin is probably the last snow leopard that's left, you know, that it obviously is going to go extinct. And he's trying to do desperate things, you know, attack, try to steal a human from a village, you know, just like the jaguars in India and so forth.
It's also ironic because, okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't know.
tell me about the irony, and then I'll go with my last question.
I mean, I just wanted to say it's ironic because on one way it's about land and some kind of a prestige, but it's funny to have such a really, how should I say, old way of, trying to accomplish anything in a world where so much is digitized and virtual. And, you
100%.
can, I mean, if he really wanted to do damage, I think he probably would have done more if he went it through like social media, economic, warfare, and through the internet. It would be, I mean, it would be far more effective if you want to go, give the devil his due, as to say, like if you want to be objective
100%.
about it, and if you want to achieve some goal, I mean, look at the China. Entirety of the warfare is cyber warfare, right? They know what they're doing. This is completely a dying mechanism from a dinosaur that was brought up in this Cold War era. There's still things that tanks matter in the world, and all of his tanks were brought up by modern technology, information, and satellite images. That's it. That's what it takes to take a tank down.
100%. It shows like how much of the country's going through archaism, and I mean Russia is known for its science and technology, so it's really,
of course,
a shame, it's like poor branding. And China, it's surprising, but also like underwhelming, because for example the TikTok argument, right, that they use this as like some kind of biochemical weapon but for the brain. It is fascinating. It's a good chess move, but it's still really low level chess when you think about it. A second
it's
level,
the ones that we see. It's a business to consumer move. It's the one that we can see on the surface, right?
It's
Who knows
still
what's
very
happening.
efficient, but it shows also that US is mostly playing low level chess, because they haven't been able to counter that move, like TikTok is really lobotomizing people, and it's kind of there's genius to it, there's dumbness to it. It's genius because China knows that like US are real much capitalism and very much consumers, and they use that against them. And the level 2 to that, by the way, is Shane, the clothing company. Why is it like level 2? First, you get like remarketing ads all the time, and Shane's strategy is to show boobs and asses, and basically that again lobotomizes people. It strays them towards porn. And for ladies, they buy these clothes, so it sexualizes society, and it lobotomizes the brain. It's kind of energy that's been switched from the brain to the dick, kind of, and that's level 2. That's like level 2.
It's psychological warfare.
Yes, and that is somewhat smart, but it still shows like how low level chess that is, on an international level. And obviously we don't want to favor these moves because it's just toxic for the whole ecosystem. If you penalize US as China, you're gonna get less trade, and same from Russia. And these folks, they still think in really old terms. And yes, it's always surprising to me to see that governments still operate at that very old level.
Agreed. I think the USA has very much the same problem within their cultural context as Russia. We have Trump and Biden, a man in their like 60s. Biden is what, 80 something. There's no chance in hell he understands what TikTok is doing, to teenagers in the States. There's no chance in hell he can. I mean, I don't think there's anybody on the governmental level at this point, maybe somewhere in lower levels in Europe. But I mean, the people that run this stuff still haven't actually witnessed the impact of social media, on the society there.
But they still reflect
it's all ideas.
The majority of population, though. That's the thing, because us, we're technologists, we're very like left wing and very advanced. True. And they reflect most of pop, which is why Trump was elected, right? It's kind of sad, and maybe I should say that, but it just reflects the main US population, literally kind of,
look at us going more political.
Like the American dream, and kind of a bit redneck and like not so far advanced, although Trump is good on some aspect, and Biden too, but they're not at the forefront. And I think we're gonna see that change with new countries that are gonna emerge. Balaji has a nice book on that, the network state, which states that basically online community will merge into physical, and then will obtain sovereignty and so forth. I recommend that book. Simon, we need to wrap this up. Where can people find out more about you and your startup studio?
Well, on LinkedIn, we have all the social media, Synthesis Startup Studio Limited. Synthesis.com is our webpage. But I think if people just follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and those social medias, they'll be updated daily on what's happening in the company and what we're doing. So anyway, contact me directly through email. I don't know if you're going to post that anywhere, Šimun.Strukan@synthesis.com. Co-CEO. Yeah, that's it.